This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time. Content presented in the following podcast is for information purposes only. Views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the host and guest and may not represent the views and opinions of the Whole Care Network. Always consult with your physician for any medical advice, and always consult with your attorney for any legal advice. And thank you for listening to the Whole Care Network.
Statistics are that about 30% of adults do any end-of-life planning. That's, wills or trusts, advanced medical directives, pre-need funeral planning. Maybe a few more do financial planning, but not that much. So that's going to leave 70% or more of our loved ones scrambling to pull together information at a very sensitive time, to make expensive decisions under duress of grief when we know our brains are not working at 100%.
This is the Heart of Hospice podcast with Helen Bauer. Gail Rubin, the Doyenne of Death, is my guest today. Whether you're a family caregiver or an end-of-life professional, the Heart of Hospice is here to enhance your hospice experience by connecting you with information you can use about end-of-life care.
This episode is sponsored by Hospice Navigation Services. When you need information about hospice, Hospice Navigation Services can help. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. You can book a complimentary 30-minute session when you need general information, or book a 60-minute session when you have in-depth questions or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today. This episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast is sponsored by the Tree of Life Conference by International Doula Life Movement. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas, November 1st through the 4th. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. Attendees will hear from expert speakers like end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes and Death Deck co-creator Lisa Paul. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details.
I don't think I've ever laughed as much during an interview as I did today. My guest today is hilarious. And yes, we're going to be talking about death and funerals and pre-planning and more death, but she's still funny. You're also going to be very touched by the stories that she tells. My guest today is Gail Rubin. She is a certified thanatologist and a certified funeral celebrant. Her nickname is the Doyenne of Death. She's an award-winning speaker, a pioneering death educator who uses humor and film clips to teach about end-of-life topics. She was featured in a TEDx talk called A Good Goodbye, and she's written 4 books on end-of-life issues. Gail is also the coordinator of the Before I Die New Mexico Festival, and you can connect with Gail Rubin at agoodgoodbye.com and beforeidiefestivals.com. You're going to hear us talk about all kinds of things. Gail's an interesting lady. She's unique. She has some interesting ideas about what her dream vacation would be. You're going to hear about that. She's also going to explain what the Doyenne of Death means. I have to confess, I wasn't really sure what Doyenne means, but it kind of sounded like she's maybe death royalty, and I think that's really what it amounts to. She did tell us that she is going to be receiving an award for Community Educator of the Year from ADEC, which is the Association for Death Education and Counseling. Gail's been having these conversations for a while and doing some amazing things, educating. She's also very creative in how she facilitates these conversations. She created the Newly Dead game that helps people have conversations about death. And if you're old enough to know what the Newlywed game was, you'll understand the Newly Dead game. She shares the lessons she learned from the death of a very close friend and some of her family members as well. Remember, the website is agoodgoodbye.com or beforeidiefestivals.com. So you can check those out after you listen to the interview. So here's my conversation with Gail Rubin. Gail, welcome to the Heart of Hospice podcast.
Great to be with you.
I feel like I should welcome your sidekick there that's with you.
My little black cat, Yvonne, yes.
Oh.
She missed me and wants to be near me.
Yeah, she's sticking close.
Yeah, if you hear a meow, that's her.
Oh, we have no problem with that. And a black cat fits perfectly with the interview today.
Yes.
So I'm going to start off with just an icebreaker question to get to know you and let my listeners get to know you a little bit. Where would you go on a dream vacation?
I would go to Mexico for Day of the Dead.
Oh, that would be very cool. Very
That would be cool. Either that or a cruise. I love cruises.
Well, I think the Day of the Dead celebration with you going to Mexico for that would be so much in alignment with who you are and the work that you do. It totally makes sense.
Yes.
Well, so we're going to dive into that. You are quite a conundrum. You have a crazy nickname, the Doyenne of Death, and we're going to talk about that. And you are a thanatologist.
Correct.
So let's talk about that before we get into all the other stuff that you're doing. What exactly is a thanatologist and what kind of work does a thanatologist do?
So when I speak, a thanatologist is a fancy name for a death educator. And when I first started doing this work, my brother Mitch suggested the title, The Doyenne of Death. And I was like, oh, I love that term. I knew what a doyenne was, but I've discovered a lot of people in the United States do not know what a doyenne is. It's a woman who is considered senior in a group who knows a lot about a particular subject. So as the Doyenne of Death, I am an expert in the party no one wants to plan, a funeral or memorial service. And when I first started doing this work, I needed some credentials because my background is public relations and event planning. And let's face it, funerals are the parties no one wants to plan.
Right.
So I found out about the Association for Death Education and Counseling and their program to become a certified thanatologist. And the term comes from the Greek demigod Thanatos, who was the personification of a good death. And his twin brother is Hypnos, which is sleep. So sleep and a good death are very closely related.
Oh.
So ADAC offers this program to become a certified thanatologist. You could attend a university and go through a program like that, but their program was basically a self-study of 3 gigantic college-level textbooks about death and grief. And then you take their online course, their online test, which they only offer 1 day a year. And it's usually around Day of the Dead. First Saturday in November is when I took it, and it happened to be November 2nd.
Very appropriate.
Yes. So I got that certification. And I'm very excited to let you know that I am going to be getting an award from ADAC this April, the Community Educator Award. It's a pretty big deal because of all the different things that I've done to break down people's resistance to talking about planning ahead for end-of-life issues.
Well, congratulations. That's wonderful.
Thank you.
Wonderful. And you are doing some fantastic work. And it's unique. It's unique. Like your shirt with the skeletons, and you have, I'm thinking that you intentionally have a black cat.
Yes. Yes. The Doyenne of Death actually has 2 black cats, but the other one is sleeping right now. But since I've been traveling for 3 weeks, the little one has been very needy since I got home.
They want to know where their mom has been, I'm sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the work that you're doing is very unique because you inject this special sense of humor that goes straight to our fears about death and dying and simply just having the conversations. Gail, how long have you been the Doyenne of Death? How long have you been working in this field?
So my first book, A Good Goodbye, Funeral Planning for Those Who Don't Plan to Die, came out in 2010. So I've been doing this 14 years now. How did that happen?
Wow. The reason I want to ask that is because I want to draw attention to the fact that you have been talking about death for 14 years. And you are still alive.
And I'm still, well, my motto is talking about sex won't make you pregnant. Talking about funerals won't make you dead.
Exactly. So that's why I thought, let's talk about it, right? Let's talk about
so
how
far,
long.
So good. Yeah. Right.
So you are, you have a background as an event planner, and you actually plan a really, really unique event. And it's called the Before I Die Festival. I'm sorry, that does not sound like a really fun, family-themed event. But tell me about what they do. Yes.
Yeah. Well, I did not originate the idea, but I have picked up and run with it. I've held festivals in New Mexico for 7 years. And actually, one year I was not here. I was helping Ohio do their first festival. So it's a collection of activities and events that can get people either to a funeral home or a cemetery or other settings without having to experience a death in the family and find out what they need to know before somebody dies to make it easier for yourself, for your loved ones, to accept that, yes, we as humans do have a 100% mortality rate. So let's talk about it and plan ahead for it. You may not know, but the statistics are that about 30% of adults do any end-of-life planning. That's, wills or trusts, advanced medical directives, pre-need funeral planning. Maybe a few more do financial planning, but not that much. So that's going to leave 70% or more of our loved ones scrambling to pull together information at a very sensitive time, to make expensive decisions under duress of grief when we know our brains are not working at 100%. And it doesn't have to be that way. So I try to get people to laugh in the face of death. I have a license to use films and film clips in my presentations. And during my 2023 Before I Die Festival in New Mexico, we actually had 4 different movies over the course of 6 days of events where I called them mortality movies. And they focused in on whatever the theme was that day, like aging and mortality. We watched the film A Man Called Otto because this was a man who was dealing with a lot of grief over the death of his wife, but he does make progress over the course of the movie. On Friday, the theme was discussing Death Won't Kill You, and we showed the Japanese movie Departures, which shows a young man, Japanese cello player, who returns to his hometown when his orchestra is dissolved. He needs to get a job. He thinks he's applying for a travel agency, but he's actually applying to help remove bodies and to do the makeup and the dressing in front of the family. And it's a wonderful meditation on confronting our dead, where they actually, do the prep in front of the family, and nothing will drive home the reality of death than, witnessing something like that. But that's a delightful movie. It actually won foreign language film Oscar, and great movie. So using movies and humor, and there are also studies that say that people will remember a TV show or a movie or a scene from something visual a lot longer than they will remember what a speaker tells them. So I try to combine what I am telling people with scenes from movies or TV shows to help reinforce the idea of planning ahead, whatever point I'm trying to make in whatever talk. And I've done talks about laughing in the face of death, funny films for funeral planning, your burning questions about cremation, helping to answer those questions. And my latest is I see dead people talking about deaths on hospice.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Very Sixth Sense with Bruce Willis. Yeah.
Yeah.
You're doing some amazing stuff at the festival. It's very unique, and I think all those different mediums that you're using really make more of an impact. Again, death by PowerPoint, where we sit and we listen to somebody speak. Mm-hmm. So much more retention. I love that. Well,
and we do behind the scenes tours, like we show people a cremation retort, and they actually open it up to show you the unprocessed remains of a person in there.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and tours at cemeteries, and other folks have done festivals that incorporate theater, art, of course, the Before I Die wall, which Candy Chang in New Orleans created and presented in her TED Talk. A number of folks have built their own versions of the Before I Die wall. It says, "Before I die, I want to blank." And people respond incredibly to say what they would like to do before they die.
Yeah.
And that's an important part of it. And I did actually write a book about how to hold a Before I Die festival, because not that many people are doing them. And I'm trying to spread the word and get people to take on. It is a big project, but you can, get sponsors to help underwrite it and make money at it, or at least not go broke doing it.
Right. At least break even.
Right. So the Before I Die Festival in a Box provides a game that I created, the Newly Dead game.
The Newly Dead game. And we're going to talk more about that too. I love that. I love it.
Newly Dead Bingo, a bingo game that's like a word game that allows you to teach about these things about death and end-of-life issues while you're playing bingo. And that's a great learning opportunity as well. But getting speakers from, different fields, as well as field trips and movies and whatnot, it's the whole package.
It really is. So what kind of attendees, or who do you see attending your Before I Die festival? What kind of people are drawn to it?
Primarily women baby boomers. About 75% of the audiences are women baby boomers, and then 25% men of varying ages. But I noticed I did get some younger folks. The millennials are also involved, but of course, they're going to be concerned about planning for their baby boomer parents.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting. I love that. I love all the different activities. So let's talk about the Newly Dead game.
Okay.
The Newly Dead. So I am old enough that I remember the Newlywed Game. It was a big thing. They would have, I don't know, 3 couples who were all newlywed, and they had to answer questions based on what they thought their partner would say or do. It was hilarious.
Yes.
Hilarious. And I remember thinking that was just the thing, right? It was so popular.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the Newly Dead game, what kind of questions are you asking for this?
So same idea. You're testing couples on how well they know each other's last wishes. And questions like, what's your partner's mother's maiden name? You need to know that for a death certificate. Earth, air, fire, or water. What would your partner say their preferred disposition method would be? So earth is burial, fire is cremation. Water would be either burial at sea or the new alkaline hydrolysis disposition, which is water cremation.
Yes.
Or air, which would be donating to science. You disappear into thin air.
Very cool. Human composting is a thing these days that's gaining more and more popularity. Where would you put that one?
I would put that in earth. So earth could either be traditional burial or body composting. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, so give me some examples of questions, specific questions that you would ask a newly dead couple.
So it's in 3 different levels of scoring. First 2 questions are 5 points, so those would be relatively easy, like, the mother's maiden name. 10-point question might be, who are the 2 closest people other than family who you would want to call with the news about your partner's death? Who would your partner say their closest 2 friends are that you would want to call first? That's a tricky question.
Yeah.
Not everybody. And in fact, some of the people are like, I don't know who I'd want you to call.
Well, isn't that a great way to make you think about these things?
And that's the whole point of these questions, to get you thinking and talking and sharing information.
I love that.
And then the 15-point question could be very challenging, where you really have to think about what is your partner's most prized possession and who would they want to have it?
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's a good one. I don't know. I've been married 36 years. I don't think I could answer that. Wow. So what is, I don't know if you can answer this or not, but what is the craziest answer you've ever gotten when playing the Newly Dead game with somebody?
Oh, wow. Well, it's interesting because I created this game to participate in the Frozen Dead Guy Days Festival in Nederland, Colorado.
The Frozen Dead Guy Days?
Correct. And there is a real frozen dead guy at the center of it all. I saw news coverage about this festival. It had coffin racing over a snowy obstacle course.
Oh my gosh.
A parade of hearses, all kinds of games like frozen turkey bowling, frozen salmon tossing, polar plunging. And I saw this national news coverage of this crazy festival, and I was like, I don't know how, but next year I'm going to be there. It was right when A Good Goodbye was just about to come out. And so I was working with a marketing guy, and he was the one who suggested creating this game to get involved with the festival. And the rest is history. Although the Frozen Dead Guy Day Festival got so popular, the town of Nederland, where it started, finally said, you can't hold this festival here anymore. And last year it moved to Estes Park. And I did go last year. Not going this year, but I'll probably be back in 2025. So it's definitely a crazy festival, and the craziest answers. Oh God, I've had some doozies.
I can imagine. You get some things that are way out there.
Yeah. But actually, if people wanted to see a game being played, I've recorded them over the years and put them on my YouTube channel. So if you just look for Newly Dead Game on YouTube, you will find some examples of games. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to have links to all your social media and your YouTube channel in the show notes so people will be able to go in and watch. I can imagine that's hilarious. I don't even know how you get through it. This conversation is so good, but we're going to take a quick break. Hang on for more great content.
In a world where compassion and community are needed more than ever, the International Doula Life Movement presents the Tree of Life Conference. Join IDLM November 1st through the 4th in San Antonio, Texas for an extraordinary experience in end-of-life care. The Tree of Life Conference is not just an event, it's a movement towards making a positive impact. Attendees will hear from expert speakers including award-winning end-of-life educator Barbara Carnes, Lisa Paul of the Death Deck, Brenda Kazire and Nancy Hireman of Odonata Care, and end-of-life advocate Helen Bauer, host of the Heart of Hospice podcast. The Tree of Life Conference is more than just workshops and seminars. It's an opportunity to connect, learn, and renew your commitment to compassionate care. This event is made possible by the team at International Doula Life Movement, who believes in the power of empathy, education, and making a difference in the world. Don't miss out on this transformative experience. Join IDLM at the Tree of Life Conference in San Antonio, Texas from November 1st through the 4th. Visit internationaldoulalifemovement.com for more details and secure your spot today.
Let's get a little more gritty. Let's dive into a little more personal, because you've already brought this up. You've had some experiences with hospice deaths over the last few years, and you've written about hospice bereavement care. Can you tell me about those experiences and the losses that you've had?
You bet. Yeah. So the first death was in October of 2021. My friend Gary Mayhew, he was my boyfriend back in the 1990s. It didn't work out with Gary as a romantic partner, but we remained good friends after that. And in fact, he was a very talented guitar player, and he played guitar at my wedding to my husband, Dave Fleischer, in 2000. So Gary was a smoker, and he developed COPD, and he was on oxygen for the last 5 years of his life. And he just kept getting weaker and weaker. And finally, in July, he went on home hospice. And one of the things about Gary was when I was dating him, he would take me out to dinner every other Tuesday. And this continued after I married Dave. And eventually Dave got to join us going out to dinner. And Gary always picked up the check. He was a very funny, kind, generous man. And while Gary was on home hospice, Dave and I brought dinner to Gary every Tuesday night. And still, he was always picking up the check. But while we would have carry out sitting around the dining room table. And after dinner, Dave, who always did the dishes at our house, would do the dishes that had built up in the sink. Gary was very independently minded, and he wanted to stay in his house. He didn't want to die in a hospital. And I was his hospice contact. So once a week, we'd meet. I'd take notes about what was going on with him. And here in New Mexico, we actually had just legalized medical aid in dying in New Mexico. And I did bring that up to him, but he didn't want to do that. And I was like, fine, it's your life, your death, whatever you want. We're here to support you. So this one Tuesday, I called Gary at 11 in the morning to talk about what we would have for dinner that night. And green chili cheeseburgers, excellent choice. And I called back at about 4 o'clock to ask what kind of cheese he wanted on his burger. And I didn't get an answer. We got over there with the burgers about 5:30, and this was October, so it was starting to get dark. Maybe it was 6 o'clock. The door was usually unlocked when we were expected, but it was still locked. I had a key. I let us in. Gary wasn't sitting in the chair in the dining room where we usually found him. I followed the oxygen tube into the bedroom. No Gary. The oxygen tube ran into the bathroom, and there was Gary, curled up on the white tile floor. No pulse, room temperature. And I did touch his neck, and I was like, yeah, this is a dead person. And my business, got to take care of business sense kicked in. I called the hospice, reported the death. They said, we'll send a nurse to make the pronouncement. So in the meantime, we sat down and ate the burgers because Gary would have wanted us to just, eat them while they're hot. But Gary, I don't know how he wound up in this position, but he was curled up on the floor. He was naked, except for his white underwear was around his knees. If he was on the toilet and maybe fell off, that's a possibility. There was nothing in the toilet, though. And his oxygen tube was several feet away from him. So I'm wondering if Gary decided, that's it. I know Gail and Dave are coming over. I'll be found soon. If maybe he didn't just, maybe self-dose with some morphine, take the oxygen off and, step out that way. But I covered him with a towel. I covered him with a blanket and waited for the hospice nurse to arrive. It was a male nurse. He pulled on pink protective gloves. You remember these kind of details.
Yeah.
Basically touched his carotid artery, basically confirmed what I already knew. He's dead. But of course, the pronouncement time was whenever he did that, not several hours earlier, which I'm sure is when that happened. One of the things about my experience with this pronouncement is the nurse did not offer to move Gary's body out of the bathroom and lay him out on the bed. I would have thought that would have been a nice thing to do. But, he just left him curled up on the floor there and didn't suggest, why don't we, try to make him more comfortable. Well, rigor mortis had also set in already, and there was no uncurling him. But so we had to wait until the funeral home removal team came to take him out of the bathroom. And I felt kind of bad about that. I know that when someone dies on hospice, it's not an emergency. It's take your time, recognize the significance of the moment. And I guess we did that to a certain extent, but it was difficult to do with Gary curled up on the bathroom floor. And I would have liked that hospice nurse to make that offer to see if we couldn't move him onto the bed, get him dressed to a certain extent. But that didn't happen. It was probably another hour or two before the funeral home removal team came. And if hospices have the opportunity to talk to the funeral homes that they work with and have the removal teams do take care of removals in a respectful manner. I think that would be a helpful conversation for hospices to have with their local funeral homes. So in this case, Gary had pre-planned, with my help, 10 years earlier. He got a direct cremation with a specific funeral home. And they sent an older man in a suit and a younger man in a polo shirt. So, even what you're wearing is registered by the families when a removal happens.
Sure.
I let them know that I was the Doyenne of Death, and I had helped Gary plan ahead for his eventual direct cremation. And as a bereaved friend, I'm not sure that was a good idea, because they felt like, well, I can tell them stories of other removals. And
no.
Yes, the older gentleman talked about, well, bathroom removals are more common than you might know. We did a removal of a guy who looked like Santa Claus, and he was wedged between the toilet and the tub.
Oh my gosh.
And you cannot unsee that once you've been told that. So I keep telling it so other people can see it and know, you really shouldn't be talking about that.
Definitely not.
Yeah. But they were able to get Gary on the blanket that I covered him with and use that as a sling to get him out of the bathroom. The older gentleman did move his underwear up into place deftly, and I was glad of that. That was a kind gesture. I got a glimpse of the side of Gary's face that had been laying on the floor, and the blood had pooled, so like whole half of his face was purple, and his eyes were open. But they wrapped him in a sheet and got him on the gurney, and then took him away. And then Dave and I had cleared out some valuable items that I called some of the friends to let them know. And so then it was on to, taking those steps after a death. But yeah, those hours there at the house with just Gary's body, I was all business. And it wasn't until Dave and I were in the car going back home that I allowed myself to cry.
Yeah, that's when the loss really hit you and you let yourself grieve. I can see from your face, even after all the time that's lapsed, that it still hits your heart.
Yeah.
So I love it that you shared such a personal story, including the mistakes that were made, the missteps that were made, because my listeners are people who are consuming the care, but there are also people that are providing the care. And that's really important for them to know. So if you're a hospice professional, you're a nurse or a social worker or whoever you are, we have family members that die in our homes. We lose people that are close to us. We are just like everybody else. The situation shouldn't be considered death light or grief light, because we have training and background. At that point, you were just the grieving friend.
Yeah.
And you needed him to be treated with respect. That's what I hear you saying, that the body should have been more respectfully treated, and the situation should have been treated with more respect. No matter what the situation was, it's not okay to tell humorous anecdotes about how other people are found dead, that sort of thing. We know deaths happen in people's homes, right? In different spaces, right? There have to be a lot of unusual circumstances. Add a call when you're going to help someone transition a body to going outside of their home to a funeral home or wherever they're going, their final disposition. That's not the place to share those anecdotes. Write a memoir or sit around and talk about it at a support group with your peers. But that's not the moment. That is not the moment. And I'm horrified, actually, that happened to you. And I'm sorry. I am sorry for that. You're such an advocate for your friend. That's an amazing thing to do for someone.
Yeah.
We're going to break for just a minute. This isn't the end of the episode. There's more to come, so stay connected.
When you need information about hospice for yourself or someone you care about, Hospice Navigation Services can help you navigate hospice care for the best end-of-life experience possible. If you or a loved one are walking this journey and need the help of an experienced guide, Hospice Navigation Services is here for you. We understand the importance of having a guide who can provide personalized, unbiased support. Our team of experienced hospice navigators is here to offer one-on-one consulting sessions by phone or video. Whether you need information about how to start hospice services or guidance for your current services, we're here to listen and provide compassionate support every step of the way. You can book a 30-minute free navigation session with an experienced hospice navigator when you need general information to start your hospice experience. Book a 60-minute hospice navigation session when you have in-depth questions about hospice or need to troubleshoot your current hospice care. You deserve compassionate support and guidance for your end-of-life care. It's your journey. Hospice Navigation Services can be your guide. Visit theheartofhospice.com to schedule your hospice navigation session today.
You have another story, Gail, that you wanted to share.
Yes, it was actually a positive hospice experience with an unfortunate death. My husband, Dave, had cardiac history, had 4 heart attacks, and he also had an enlarged prostate, and decided and got clearance from his cardiologist to have a TURP surgery. It's transurethral resection of the prostate to help shrink the prostate and help with those issues. Well, he had the surgery, but you have to go off blood thinners when you have surgery. And 2 days after the surgery, he had a heart attack, which led to a whole host of medical complications. He had sepsis. He had kidney failure.
Oh, wow.
He had very low blood pressure. He was readmitted back to the hospital. He coded twice in the hospital and was on a ventilator for a day and a half. He got off the ventilator, was starting to recover. We were talking about maybe rehab in a rehab facility, and then he crashed. And the ICU doctors said, it's time for comfort care. And I said, okay. And on a lighter note, the woman who came to fill out the hospice admission form said, you're the Gail Rubin? I'm such a fangirl.
Oh, she knew you.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so that was a bright spot in what was, a sad time.
Well, do you think because she knew you and the work that you're doing, do you think you got hospice admission light, or did they really provide all the explanation and everything about what was going to happen?
Oh, well, I knew, and we filled out all the forms. I signed on his behalf because he was basically unconscious at that point.
Yeah.
And he qualified for inpatient hospice. And there's a wonderful 10-bed inpatient unit as part of Presbyterian Hospital here in Albuquerque. But he was in the main hospital, so he had to be transported by ambulance to the hospice. And the director of the hospice actually used to be a heart doctor, and she explained what was, do's and don'ts, about, don't stroke their arm, just hold their hand, talk to them in low voices. And, we had no idea how long he was going to last in hospice. But I was there around the clock for 8 days. he lasted for 8 days in hospice. And it was such a supportive experience. They brought trays of food for me to eat for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. When I would leave for a couple hours to go home, take a shower, feed the cats, go back to the hospice, another family member would sit there with him. So somebody was with him around the clock. And on the 8th day, one of the hospice nurses who was there when he was admitted the week before looked at him and she said, I think he might be getting close. And one of the things that they did was they gave me the paperwork from the ER admission, from the ICU admission, from his hospice admission, and it detailed all the things that had gone wrong with him. So I knew what we were doing was the right thing, choosing hospice. And after I looked through all that paper, I was sitting next to him. I decided to call a girlfriend and catch her up on everything we'd been going through for 3 weeks. And within 15 minutes, Nurse Amber, who was helping us that evening, came in and she said, his breathing has changed. You better come back to the room. He waited until I left the room to die, which is not, so unusual. It happens a lot. But yeah, he did not want me to see him die. And Nurse Amber said, take as much time as you need. So I talked to him. I called my brother and my brother-in-law. Slipped the ring off of his finger. And then finally I said, okay, I'm ready for what comes next. And they'd been washing his body with like wipes almost daily. They kept him very clean. So Nurse Amber came back with NAID, and they cleaned him up. They removed the ports. They laid a sheet over his chest. And Nurse Amber took the last of a get well bouquet of flowers, the last viable flowers, and laid them on his chest. And I had brought a toy bat. Dave loved bats. That was his personal symbol. I brought the one that he had in his car. I brought it the other day, so I put that with him to accompany him on his journey. And Nurse Amber called the funeral home, and that removal was excellent. It was a young man and a young woman. They both wore suits. They were very quiet and respectful when they wheeled the cart into the room. They asked questions. Was he a veteran? If he was a veteran, they had a Stars and Stripes cot cover they could use. I said no. Is there any jewelry you want to remove? And I had already taken the ring off. And once they got him on the cart, they said, do you mind if we cover his face? And that struck me as a little odd, but I can see how some people would be upset about that. And I said, no, that's fine. So they did that. And then we gathered up all the stuff I had accumulated in the room over the course of the week. Nurse Amber walked with me as we followed them out.
I'm here with you, Gail. You take your time.
So we left the hospice wing, got to a corridor split where funeral home took Dave to the left, and Nurse Amber escorted me to the right, out through the emergency room of the hospital, out to my car in the parking lot, and gave me a hug and said, drive carefully. So the fact that she walked with me to my car made a very big impression. It was so all of that I thought was an excellent hospice experience.
So much different from your experience before.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing so much of that. I know that's such a tender part of your heart still.
Yeah. And as just a quick rejoinder to that, as a result of going through all that, my 93-year-old father, who also had heart issues at the same time in April, Dave was going through all this. And I was like, I cannot go to Florida to deal with this right now. I got my hands full here. But my dad had heart failure. And like 2 days after his 93rd birthday, it got worse and he was going to the hospital, and I was talking to him on the phone before the EMTs came. And he said, I want what Dave had, meaning inpatient hospice.
Yes.
And he spent one night in the hospital, and we got him in inpatient hospice the next day. And then I flew to Florida on Saturday to be there, and I was there with my dad overnight for Sunday and Monday night, and was there in the room when he died, but I was asleep. He slipped away. But I have other experience about that hospice, not as great as the one for Dave, but other lessons, for hospice from my dad's experience as well.
Well, those stories that you're sharing, that openness that you have when you talk about things, we learn so much from that. Hospice doesn't always get it right. Okay. I mean, like hospice nurses that do deaths and funeral homes that come to pick up a person's body. We do this all the time. We may get good at it, but we still make mistakes. And I think it's really good for us to hear what would have been a better choice, what would have been a better response to things, from us to learn from these stories. And it's very generous of you to share something that is obviously so painful, still filled with a lot of grief, but a very vivid memory. And I think that's another good point. We need to, as end-of-life workers, educators, providers, boots on the ground, bedside folks, remember that everything we do, everything we say, how we present ourselves, it all impacts what is one of the most intense experiences a person can have, the death of someone they care about.
Absolutely. Yep.
So the last thing I wanted to touch on was you've written a little bit about your experience with hospice bereavement care. So hospices, for my listeners, hospice agencies in the United States are required to furnish bereavement care, which is grief support, for about 13 months after a family or someone experiences the death of a loved one. So what was your experience with bereavement care like, and what would you tell somebody who's a bereavement coordinator?
Well, my first experience, I was driving in my car, my cell phone rings, and it's a bereavement counselor calling about Gary. And I was like, I was not thinking about Gary. I was not ready to talk about bereavement driving around in my car. And when you think about it, in this day and age, if you get a phone call from a number you don't recognize, a lot of people aren't going to answer the phone.
Sure.
But I'm a baby boomer, so I usually answer the phone when somebody calls.
You're giving the boomers a bad name, Gail.
So why not use email or text to make an appointment for a bereavement coordinator to talk to, the family of somebody who died? That way they can be mentally prepared to talk about it. And, the coordinator's not, shooting blanks, basically. She was like, do you want to talk about Gary? And I'm like, not at the moment. I'm driving around town. So, maybe scheduling a call. There are text programs that are coming online that can help people with bereavement. Maybe look into that. I don't see that much follow-up using email, which, given that, the younger generations are not so much using emails, but I think your older audiences that would be experiencing these kind of deaths would maybe be able to access email more readily. And in addition, some of the mailed pieces that I got for Gary didn't really connect to the season or, tips for things you can do. I found that what I was getting from this other, actually, it was the same hospice, which is kind of weird. Maybe they stepped up their game over the course of a year or so.
Yeah.
But it was more attuned to the season, reminding people about group opportunities for discussion if I wanted to participate in that, ways to memorialize your loved one based on the season, those kind of tips. I found that helpful. But just generic grief mailing pieces, not so much.
You didn't really feel the support coming from that.
Yeah.
Interesting. It's a good message for anybody who's providing bereavement support, bereavement care for a hospice agency. Gail, yeah. I'm so honored that you would share all of that with me. That's so personal and so intense. I think that you're creating meaning. On top of all the other work that you were doing before that you experienced your own personal deaths of someone you love. Tell listeners how they can connect with you, buy your books, A Good Goodbye, and how they can connect with the Before I Die Festival.
So my website is agoodgoodbye.com, and I do have an online store there where you can I have 4 books now. Also, Hail and Farewell, Cremation Ceremonies, Templates, and Tips. Kicking the Bucket List, 100 Downsizing and Organizing Things to Do Before You Die.
Gotta love that title.
And the Before I Die Festival in a Box. I also have snappy T-shirts with the Talking About Sex Won't Make You Pregnant, Talking About Funerals Won't Make You Dead. Also, The One Who Dies with the Most Toys Still Dies. And all men and women are cremated equal.
Oh, that's awesome.
So fun books, fun T-shirts, and the Before I Die Festival website is beforeidiefestivals.com.
Awesome. Like I said, I'll have links in the show notes to everything so people can connect in with you directly. Gail Rubin, you are truly the Doyenne of Death. You are awesome. You are the whole package. The beauty, the meaning, the humor, the openness, and the direct, let's just face it down and go through it together. Thank you so much for talking with me today. It's been wonderful.
Thank you. Thank you, Helen.
Be sure to catch the next episode of the Heart of Hospice podcast. You can find more episodes on theheartofhospice.com, and don't forget to follow us on your favorite podcast platform. You can connect with the Heart of Hospice on Facebook and Instagram, and send your questions or comments by email to helen@theheartofhospice.com. And remember, no matter who you are or where you are in your hospice journey, you are the heart of hospice.
This is the Whole Care Network. Helping you tell your story one podcast at a time.